Golden Gems of Life, Gathered Jewels for the Home Circle by S.C. Ferguson and E.A. Allen, Central Publishing House, Cincinnati, 1884. Chapter: Self-Control. Self-control, a form of courage. Importance of mental faculties. Government and progress. Composure, highest form of power. Strong temper, not always a bad one. Man born for dominion. Self-control. Self-control is the highest form of courage. It is the base of all virtues. It is one of the most important, but one of the most difficult things for a powerful mind to be its own master. If he reigns within himself and rules passions, desires, and fears, he is more than a king. Too often, self-control is made to mean only the control of angry passions, but that is simply one form of self-control. In another, a higher and more complete sense, it means the control over all the passions, appetites, and impulses. True wisdom ever seeks to restrain one from blindly following his own impulses and appetites, even those which are moral and intellectual, as well as those which are animal and sensual. In the supremacy of self-control consists one of the perfections of the ideal man: not to be impulsive, not to be spurred hither and thither by each desire that in turn comes uppermost, but to be self-restrained, self-balanced, governed by the joined decision of the feelings in council assembled, before whom every action shall have been fully debated and calmly determined. This is true strength and wisdom. Mankind are endowed by the Creator with qualities which raise them infinitely higher in the scale of importance than any other members of the animal world. They are given reason as a guide to follow rather than instinct. But if men give the reins to their impulses and passions, from that moment they surrender this high prerogative. They are carried along the current of their life and become the slaves of their strongest desires for the time being. To be morally free, to be more than an animal, man must be able to resist instinctive impulses. This can only be done by the exercise of self-control. Thus, it is this power that constitutes the real distinction between a physical and a moral life, and that forms the primary basis of individual character. 9/10 of the vicious desires that degrade society and the crimes that disgrace it would shrink into insignificance before the advance of valiant self-discipline, self-respect, and self-control. It is necessary to one's personal happiness to experience control over his words as well as his acts, for there are words that strike even harder than blows, and men may speak daggers, even though they use none. Character exhibits itself in control of speech as much as in anything else. The wise and forbearant man will restrain his desire to say a smart or severe thing at the expense of another's feelings, while the fool speaks out what he thinks and will sacrifice his friend rather than his joke. There are men who are headlong in their language as in their actions because of the want of forbearance and self-restraining patience. Government is at the bottom of all progress. The state or nation that has the best government progresses most. So the individual who governs best himself makes the most rapid progress. The native energies of the human soul press it to activity. Controlled, they bear it forward in right paths. Uncontrolled, they urge it on to probable destruction. No man is free who has not the command over himself, but allows his appetites or his temper to control him. and to triumph over these is of all conquest the most glorious. He who is enslaved to his passions is worse governed than Athens was by her 30 tyrants. He who indulges his sense in any excesses renders himself obnoxious to his own reason, and to gratify the brute in him displeases the man and sets his two natures at variance. We ought not to sacrifice the sentiments of the soul to gratify the appetites of the body. Passions are excellent servants, and when properly trained and disciplined, are capable of being applied to noble purposes. But when allowed to become masters, they are dangerous in the extreme. To resist such impulses, to subdue powerful passions, to silence the voice of vehement desire, is a strong and noble virtue. And the virtue rises in height, beauty, and grandeur in proportion to the strength of the impulses subdued. True virtue is not always visible to the gaze of the world. It is often still and calm. Composure is often the highest result of power, and there are seasons when to be still demands immeasurably higher strength than to act. Think you it demands no power to calm the stormy elements of passions, to throw off the load of dejection, to repress every repining thought when the dearest hopes are withered, and to turn the wounded spirit from dangerous reveries and wasting grief to the quiet discharge of ordinary duties? Is there no power put forth when a man stripped of his property, of the fruits of a life's labor, quells discontent and gloomy forebodings, and serenely and patiently returns to the task which Providence assigns? We doubt not that the all-seeing eye of God sometimes discerns the subtlest human energy under a form and countenance which, by their composure and tranquility, indicate to the human spectator only passive virtues. Individuals who have attained such power are among the great ones of earth. Strength of character consists in two things: power of will and power of self restraint. It requires two things, therefore, for its existence: strong feelings and strong command over them. Ofttimes we mistake strong feelings for strong character. He is not a strong man who bears all before him, at whose frown domestics tremble and the children of the household quake. On the contrary, he is a weak man. It is his passions that are strong. He, mastered by them, is weak. You must measure the strength of a man by the power of the feelings he subdues, not by the power of those that subdue him. Did we ever see a man receive a flagrant injury and then reply calmly, "That is a man spiritually strong"? Or did we ever see a man in anguish stand as if carved out of solid rock, mastering himself, or one bearing a hopeless daily trial remain silent and never tell the world what cankered his peace? That is strength. He who with strong passions remains chaste, he who keenly sensitive with manly powers of indignation in him, can be provoked and yet restrain himself and forgive. These are strong men, the spiritual heroes. A strong temper is not necessarily a bad temper, but the stronger the temper, the greater is the need of self-discipline and self-control. Strong temper may only mean a strong and excitable will. Uncontrolled, it displays itself in fitful outbreaks of passion, but controlled and held in subjection, like steam pent up within the mechanism of a steam engine, it becomes the source of energetic power and usefulness. Some of the greatest characters in history have been men of strong tempers, but with equal strength of determination to hold their motive power under strict regulation and control. He is usually a moral weakling who has no strong desires or strong temper to overcome. But he who with these fails to subdue them is speedily ruined by them. Man is born for dominion, but he must enter it by conquest and continue to do battle for every inch of ground added to his sway. His infant exertions are put forth to establish the authority of his will over his physical powers. His after efforts are for the subjection of the will to the judgment. There are times which come to all of us when our will is not completely fashioned to our hands, and the restless passions of the mind hold us in sway. Seasons when all of us do and say things which are unbecoming, unseemly, and which lower and debase us in the opinion of others and also of ourselves. Self-control, however, is a virtue which will become ours if we cultivate it properly, if we strive right manfully for its possession. Fight a bitter warfare against irritability, nervousness, jealousy, and all unkindness of heart and soul. But it must be cultivated properly. One exercise of it will not win us the victory. We must, by constant repetition of efforts, obtain at last the victory, which will bring us repose, which will enable us to say to the raging waves of passion, "Thus far canst thou come, and no further." We must be faithful to ourselves, faithful in our watch and ward over tongue, eye, and hand. It is only by so doing that man comes to the full development of his powers. It is alike the duty and the birthright of man. Moderation in all things and regulating the actions only by the judgment are the most eminent parts of wisdom. He that ruleth his own spirit is greater than he that taketh a city.